Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here. And welcome to today's lecture with Neal Ambrose-Smith, an artist, an educator, and the son of the artist Jaune Quick-to-See Smith. Today we gather together to remember and celebrate two extraordinary women who have passed away recently. The first is Jaune Quick-to-See Smith. Born at the St. Ignatius Indian Mission on the Flathead Indian Reservation in central Montana, Smith was an enrolled member of the Confederate Salish and Kootenai Nation. She is one of the most important contemporary artists of her generation. Her work was central to redefining contemporary Native American art, while her role as an educator, curator, and an activist has had substantial impacts on the ways in which Indigenous art has been understood and appreciated. Over the past 40 years, Smith was the subject of over 100 solo exhibitions. During that same time, she organized and or curated over 30 exhibitions of Native American art. She also completed several collaborative public artworks, including the floor design in the Great Hall at the Denver Airport, a sculpture in Yerba Buena Park in San Francisco, and a mile-long sidewalk history trail in Seattle. She was the recipient of many, many awards and honorary degrees, and her work has been collected by museums throughout the United States and beyond. The second woman we honor tonight is Yvonne Swann Simon, a member of the class of 1982 who passed away in 2023. A biology major and member of the Bowdoin swim team, Simon was a science editor at the publisher Houghton Mifflin in Boston before co-founding Six Red Marbles, an educational software company. She later moved to New Hampshire, where she became the chief learning architect for an industry-leading online continuing education committee. And this lecture is in honor of Yvonne. To remember and honor her life, three friends in the class of 1982, Jimmy Ellis, Martha Henry, and Leslie Rayner, all of whom are here today, reached out to the museum to inquire about acquiring a work of art in Yvonne's memory. After much research and discussion, they decided eventually to purchase Jaune Quick-to-See Smith's wonderful 1993 drawing entitled Jocko, Gray Whale. This drawing, which is now on view at the museum, and the museum is open late tonight till 8:30. It's on view in the Boyd Gallery on the upper level, exemplifies the aesthetics for which Smith is known. Over a cream background, Smith layers a series of representational images that reference modern life, including a soaring airplane, a large truck, and a line of teacups. Other motifs reference Smith's Native American heritage, perhaps most prominently the large whale at the center of the drawing. The bold gestural washes of color and paint drips evoke the work of abstract expressionists who have influenced Smith's work, including Rauschenberg, Joan Mitchell, Jasper Johns. The title of the drawing, and the series of which it is a part, references the Jocko River, which flows through the Flathead Indian Reservation, where Smith was born and raised. Smith's attention to place aligns with what was, at the time, an emerging interest in critically engaging with Western cartographic traditions. Her focus on place and landscape also reflects her lifelong commitment to commenting on environmental issues from an Indigenous worldview. Of note, this work is the first by Jaune Quick-to-See Smith to enter the museum's collection, and we are deeply grateful to the three Bowdoin classmates who made possible its acquisition and this program today. This afternoon, we are also especially honored to have her son, Neal, with us and appreciate his traveling from New Mexico to be here and to meet with students earlier today. Encouraged by his mother, Neal studied painting at the University of Northern Colorado before completing his MFA in printmaking from the University of New Mexico. Neal is known for mixing imagery from a range of sources, especially material drawn from pop culture, including comics, television, and science fiction. Like his mother, he has exhibited and published his work widely. Formerly a teacher at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, Neal has also designed an app called Artist Ideas that lists 100 art ideas to consider. I highly recommend you checking this free app out. In any case, we're thrilled he can be here today to speak about his work as well as the work of his mother. Please welcome Neal Ambrose-Smith. Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank Emily, Frank, Anne, and the college and the board for bringing me here. This is an honor, and I'm excited to be here. But first, let's do some activity. You guys want to do something fun? Okay. So it's going to be a repeat after me. So we're going to together we're going to speak in Salish, which is a language from my reservation. Salesian people go from Montana all the way to the West Coast, to California, to Washington, and then up into Alaska. So we're all related. Tlingit, Tsimshian, Salish. Okay, you ready? Ap ish te melish. Chindis lem te hutka es. Yamen sulti. Klu edlier. Esiap kleni. Klu hut eat. Skut kalich. Hasasect. Hello, all my relations, and welcome to our gathering and celebration of our wide and varying tribal identities in art, because we all come from a tribe somewhere. Some of us may be Visigoths, some of us may be locals, but we all, from somewhere, are tribal people. So we're all related. Does that make sense? Do you agree? Yes. Excellent. Okay. I want to read, this is Jaune was a painter, and she drew a lot. She made prints, and she made sculpture, and I actually have a video of her dancing, actually, because her retrospective was at the Whitney, traveled to the Fort Worth Modern, and there's this giant Richard Serra out front. It's this big slabs of Corten steel that go up like 18 feet in the air, and there's like I think it's two pieces, and they're sort of bent and curved. But when you go inside, it echoes, and it makes this really echoey sound. And myself and Jaune both are not really Richard Serra fans. He's quite a contentious individual and not very friendly. But this was the one Richard Serra piece that we both agreed that was actually fabulous because it was interactive. You get inside it, and it makes this echo chamber. And so I have this video of her actually dancing, jumping up and down and clapping her hands. So she does dance too, I'll say that. But along all those things, she's a writer. She's done a lot of writing. So I want to read some of her poetry, if that's okay. Okay. This is her culture poem. Culture is our identity. It makes us different from one another. Culture is our history, yours and mine. Culture tells us who we are. Robots and computers never have it. but this is old. She wrote this a long time ago. Because we know that AI is coming and that it's probably going to have some kind of romantic notion of what it is. And so I think probably identity is on that list. Would you agree with that? I don't know. I mean, science fiction tells us so anyway. Okay. If you take your soma pill, you won't have your culture either. Culture can be our creation myth. Did Coyote capture the sun? Or did a voice say, "Let there be light"? Culture is our creation story. Did God on high create the humans first and make them most important? Or did the Creator place the animals in the land and the humans in a holistic world? Culture is our birthing method. Do we sit up? Or do we lay down? Or do we squat? Culture can be the way we greet a newborn child. Is it washed in a mother's urine? Or is it held to the morning sun? Or is it slapped on the back? Culture is our umbilical cord. Do we bury it, carry it, or throw it away? Culture can be our notion of beauty. Is it the tattoo on our chin, or the red clay in our hair, or walking with spiked sticks under our heels? Culture can be the way we bury our dead. Do we push a raft into the river, or make a clay mound above the ground, or sprinkle ash from a plane? Culture defines the way we teach our children. Through stories about plants, the animals, and the earth, and through stories about Star Wars, Spider-Man, Dragon Ball Z, or SpongeBob SquarePants. Culture defines the way we dance. In a lambada, the fancy dance, the square dance, or the salsa. How many of you salsa? Not even just a little bit? Okay, all right. I'll see you later. Culture defines our social group. The country club, the Bloods and the Crips, no gang signs, the RV campers, or the bingo mafia. Culture is how we greet one another. Do we kiss cheeks, give high fives, handshakes, or rub noses? Culture is our language, slang, humor, gestures, dance, religion, ceremony, clothing, music, art, folkways, tattoos, literature, foods, oral history, institutions, systems, governments, and more. That's your culture, your identity, yours and mine. Did you like that one? I like that one too. It's a good one. Interestingly, I found, she did a lot of letter writing. When I was a kid, it was the IBM Selectric. Anybody remember what that is? They're very loud. So we had two in the house, and that thing was banging away all night back in the 70s and 80s. And then we got a computer, and so that was banging away. And then the impact printer, with the box of paper, thunk, 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 that was going all night too. Anyway, she has a lot of correspondence. So I found this letter the other day where she was talking to Janet Berlow. Some of us know who Janet Berlow is. The art world is connected, deeply, deeply connected, as we are with our families and our friends and that sort of thing. But the art world is like very connected. So anyway, they were talking, and Janet was interested in putting a poem in one of the books. And I want to read this one. It's really good. The chant. Watch me move my hands. They are moving. They are moving. Watch me move my soul. It is moving. It is moving. Watch me make my art. All is moving. All is moving. Isn't that good? Then she wrote, best wishes. Let's see. How are we doing? Is this good? Okay. I thought this was nice to get into, and then we'll dive into some of that. Okay. Okay, this one's really good, and it's got her writing on it. A lot of times when she'd go somewhere, she'd write her speech on the plane and then continue rewriting it just before she went up to speak. So there was this yellow folder. I don't have it today, but the yellow folder was always the thing to find before we went on a trip. Where's my yellow folder? You know, and it had all these papers in it and her writing and scribbles and things taped in there and torn. And anyway, that's how it goes. In the beginning, art had no name. Art turned the unseen into the visible, the tangible. Art made the mysterious less frightening. Art had purpose. In the beginning, art was so integrated into the community that music, dance, poetry, painting, and the narrative were not separate entities. They all had purpose. In the beginning, artists were the shaman. Artists choreographed the dances. Artists blessed the hunt with soot and ochre on the rock walls, and artists passed the people's history down through storytelling and poetry. Art had purpose. In the beginning, art recorded life. Art expressed religion. Art enhanced life. Art uplifted life. Art explained the mysteries. Art healed the sick. Art had purpose. It's the process, the joy of making art. It's what we artists do, the ritual, the chant. It's the time we spend between the beginning and the end, the process. And then she has a little note here that says, students need to hear this, and you need to put on some Beethoven and Bach and Mozart. It's always pretty good. All right, this one, there's a show Jean and I curated for, we did the National Gallery, and at the same time we were working on Rutgers at Zimmerling in New Jersey, and she wasn't able to make it to that opening at Rutgers, so I just went, and we had one of my friends come, John Hitchcock. He's a printmaker from Wisconsin, and so we did a performance. So I wrote this poem for that opening, and I think it's pretty good. You might like it. Okay. What if there was no word for art? What if the people and their cultures were connected to each other and the land? What if there weren't any rules about art? Does that sound familiar? No rules. Rules like if clay's on a table, it is a bowl and it is a clay pot. If clay's on a pedestal, then it transforms into a vessel and it becomes known as ceramic. What if there was no difference between the textile on the floor or on the wall or on your back? Is it art or who decides? Hojo Nasha, my friend Lawrence Shorty, who's Dene, once told me, Hojo Nasha, walk in beauty. What if things are created with care for us to walk in beauty? If you cry on your sister's wedding cake, you might have a like water for chocolate moment. All things are connected. Some say Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian formline design came from shapes on the toad or a frog. And some say they come from the tail feathers of the red-headed flicker. If you look carefully, you can see the trigon shape on the flicker's tail feathers. What if there was a holistic view of the world and that all things were connected and creativity was inherent in all those things? Chief Seattle once said, all things are connected. And that if you dig a hole and you don't plant something, your horse will break its leg. It's good advice. Somebody else said something like that too. Sir Isaac Newton once said, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Sir Isaac Newton's third law is all things are connected. My friend Dwight Bilodeau, he's Blackfeet, once told me that when you make something so beautiful, you have to give it back. It's a giveaway. In fact, one time I was with Dwight, we were doing a Sundance up in on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana, And we're sitting there, and he's showing me how to nap. That's making arrowheads. It's called napping, and you chip away at the obsidian. And there's this ridge behind us, and he's like, I have hundreds of sculptures buried up on that ridge. And I was like, Dwight, you could have a show. He's like, I know, but they were too good. A giveaway, that's what we call it. He had carvings buried all over the reservation. Dwight would give them back to the land. Dwight's carved stone came from the land, and it will go back to the land. We came from the land, and we will go back to the land. I came from the land, and I will go back to the land. And you came from the land, and you will go back to the land. We don't bury our dead. We give them back to the land. The giveaway. Giveaways are celebrations. Up at Hart Butte on Blackfeet Reserve, my friend Gigi Kipp had a naming ceremony at the end of the Ocon ceremony. Giving away names, that's a giveaway. At my sister's birthday party, we gave away blankets. That's a giveaway. What goes around comes around. All things connected. Sometimes the whole community gathers for a giveaway. Some pueblos throw food and blankets off rooftops for New Year's. They give away food to the people. That's a giveaway. The Tlingit call it a potlatch. A potlatch was outlawed in Canada for many years. It was against the law to give something away in Canada. Ironic. Ever borrow a cup of sugar? In fact, many aspects of tribal ideology, religion, music, and dance of the United States were outlawed. In fact, until 1978. It was against the law for me to dance until 1978. Now I dance every day. And so should each one of you, because we can. We are all connected. All things are connected. Peter York once said, everything in its right place. They say the richest person in the tribe is the one that gives it all away. But my friends in New York would tell you, oh, they just owe you. Thank you. Okay. Jaune was a very prolific artist. And we were talking about this earlier today. And the reason I know this is because her first Joe Mitchell grant was in 95, and it was $5,000. Today it's like $60,000, which is really great. That means that those Mitchell paintings are worth a lot. Anyway, with that $5,000, we bought a press. She wanted an etching press, and then she just cranked out on prints all the time in her studio. But by the time 2000s rolled around, the Mitchell Foundation was coming up with a program to archive artists' work. And Jaune was one of 4 artists that were selected for this program because they were like, we want to know what it is. So they threw money at these artists and a computer and a database, and they said, let us know how it goes. And Jaune's very adamant about her business and her job, and so we had to dive into this thing whole hog. And anyway, I discovered that the VIN number that we came up with for all the artworks, which is, and this is really great, actually. We came up with 9 digits because computers will truncate anything beyond 9 digits when you're looking at lists and you're looking for things. And so it's a pain in the butt to have to drag the window over further every time you do that. So 9 digits, right? So we decided that the first 2 digits would be the artist's name because it has a marker or it's a buy-in for the artist. Then the next would be the year. So that would be 2002, let's say. Because we know that an artist is not going to make art typically for 100 years. I could be wrong, and the future is around the corner. But for right now, for all intensive purposes, the database and this numbering system is for that particular artist. And so we know that it's 2002. All right, and then the next would be a code for the type of work it was. So if it's a drawing, it's DW. If it's a print, it's maybe PR, painting, PG, something like that. Whatever you want. And then the next 3 digits is going to be the number of that work for that year. So when we look at this, we know that Jaune Quick-to-See Smith made this first drawing in 2002. And since it's an archive project, this doesn't necessarily mean that it was the first drawing that was made that year. It just means it's the first drawing that we grabbed and numbered. And this had incredible legs, because you could write it on the side of a box, you could put it in the database, it could go into a computer or whatever, but we always know how to find it. Problem is, Jaune needed another digit because she was making over 1,000 drawings a year in the 80s, and that didn't include prints or paintings. So she was cranking. All right, so getting to this, by the time this rolls around in 93, there's hundreds and hundreds of drawings that fed into this, that were like leading into this direction. So the works from the 70s, the late 70s, were more abstract, a little looser, a little more negative space around the edges of the paper, but they still had figures. They would have a dog or a horse or that kind of thing. And then they just had kind of like landscape divided areas, talking about squares, shapes as landscape, that kind of thing. So by the time the 90s roll around, now she's been traveling like crazy because she's been going to New York almost every month. And in fact, it was a student, Student Arts League or something, that they thought that she was part of the Student Art League in the 80s. And she didn't live there. She was just there every month. So it was the illusion that she lived there. So anyway, those works fed into this one, and more stuff went into it. Now she's visiting her cousin on the reservation in Montana, and he had just started Two Eagles High School, and he was getting ready to start Salish Kootenai College. And so things about her childhood, her dad, any trucks are talking about growing up on the reservation with her dad. Dad was a horse trader, and she's flying all the time, traveling. And she was the internet, actually, back then, because one of the things that she encountered was people didn't know anything about contemporary Native art. Oh, I thought you guys were all dead. And so she would collect slides from Indian artists wherever she went. So she was at, I think in Seattle, it was Joe Feddersen, picked him up, and then, who's that guy that just did the Venice Biennale, right? Jeffrey Gibson, a student that she picked up his slide. Like every one of these artists that we're hearing about today, those are artists that were impacted by Jaune's internet activity, traveling around the country and bringing these communities together and grabbing slides. And then when she'd give a talk, she would show all those slides so that nobody could say, oh, where are the Indian artists? And she's like, well, they're right here. I just showed you 100 slides. And so that became her operating system. So planes. Lillian Pitt was an artist that she ran into. So she started hanging out with Lillian and talking about plateau pictographs. And this is the story of She Who Watches. It's a story to tell the kids, don't go out in the forest by yourself, which is common sense. But the story is like, because she who watches will find you, kind of thing. Pictographs up from the plateau region, and especially up like Victoria, and then moving through Canada. Those started showing up in the work. A coffee and cigarettes. There's no cigarettes in here. Those would be in the Philip Guston paintings that we would study all the time. But definitely coffee shows up. And smoking and drinking coffee was like the routine in New York and wherever. Everybody did it. And that was one of the rules that Jaune followed, as to be an artist when she was growing up. And every picture she saw of a famous artist was a guy, first of all. And secondly, they were smoking. They all had a cigarette, with this really beautiful smoke. So she started smoking. Mound people from the eastern area, the Hand, coastal Salish people, whales up in Alaska, really important, and then art history is so important, because you have to know from where you've come to go somewhere. You can't just go somewhere without having some of your identity with you. And all art history is part of our identity as an artist. So this would be Cy Twombly, maybe a little Bryce Marden, right? Maybe this is Joseph Albers, right? This red dot. Or maybe it's just putting a red dot in there, because how many of us know how important it is to put a red dot somewhere? If it doesn't work, put a red dot in it. If that doesn't work, make it big, right? 1950, that's, what's his name? I can't remember that guy's name. I had it earlier today. Rand, Paul Rand, the designer. Let's see. Well, you get the idea. Oh, Drips, Fritz Scholder. She sent a letter to Fritz Scholder when she was in Framingham State College, talking about her work, her practice, and then saying, I love your paintings and everything. And he wrote back and he said, my advice is always spend your money on canvases and pencils and paint. Never run out of supplies. It's okay to not have coffee, but you gotta have your art supplies so you can make your art. Because if you're not making your art, you're gonna perish. And so we have thousands and thousands of reams of paper in our studios, because she would collect paper. And sometimes we'd pull paper out just to sniff it, just to touch it, but then you don't use it, kind of thing. So that we have a lot of paper. And we have some paint too that I need to get working on. And so the drips are Fritz. He did a lot of dripping stuff too, yeah. Does that give you some, I think if you look at any of Jaune's work, you're going to see European canon. You're going to see AE painters from America. You're going to see indigenous culture, and all at once. And then also, there's going to be some kind of cheeky political humor in there about something, like Coyote sees the world clearly. All right. Any questions? Who's first? Anybody? No questions? Okay.
So I'm just interested in how you two worked together and when that started and how that worked.
So in 76, she was drawing in the garage, and there'd be this layer of smoke about this high. I think I was 8. And she would draw on the wall. You can't really see it in this picture, but there's pinholes at the top. So all of the drawings would be hung, because she would stand and draw. Cigarette, and then draw. And so I would hear that sound of charcoal dragging on this is Arche cover or Arche buff or something. And so it has a lot of tooth. And so that sound, I grew up with that sound and watching her make marks. So I think that's part of my DNA as well, is mark making. So we're mark makers in that way. So it started sort of there. And then even before that, when I was in my high chair, she gave me a bowl of chocolate pudding, and then I would paint my face. And then my grandmother would come in the trailer and have a conniption over the situation and clean me up and then storm out and leave. And then my mom would get the chocolate pudding out again, and then we would paint. We do that. So it sort of happened that way. And then in the later 70s into the 80s, I was sort of a studio assistant. So I would tear canvases, bury them in the yard, or take them to the dump, tear drawings, stuff that just she didn't like, do stuff like that. And then I would stretch canvases in gesso and things like that. And then when I was going to go to college, she said, "Well, I'll pay for your college, but you have to go to art school." And which is normal, right? Because other families say the same thing. Like a couple of lawyers would say, "Well, you can take dance classes and play in a band, but you got to put bread on the table. You have to be a lawyer." And she said the same thing. She's like, "Well, you can take dance classes and play in a band, but you need to put bread on the table. You need to be a painter." And so starting that journey, I had already spent almost a decade with contemporary Native artists coming in and out of the house, because they would come into town. We had this Gathering of Nations was a big powwow in Albuquerque that was started in the late 70s. So that brings a lot of Indians in. And then also Indian Market in Santa Fe would bring a lot of Indians in. So they would be staying at the house. So I was always surrounded by artists and meeting them. And then she would take me with her. So like one time we went and spent the weekend with Paul Brock and Marion Shapiro in their flat in Soho. And those two are really funny because all they did was fight all the time. And then he had this big cigar that he would just chew on all day, which was kind of gross. But anyway, so it was like a training ground for me on how to work with an artist, and also how to be an artist. Because it was all part of that routine. So then I come back home from college, and I had started smoking because everybody smokes. And that's when she decided to quit smoking because, oh my God, he's smoking. But I was like, this is going to be great. We're going to have cigarettes in the studio and talk about art history, And in fact, before I went to college, she gave me a sketchbook, one of those black covered, blank pages. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And she's like, it's a sketchbook. You have to, you make your ideas in there. You're drawing there and stuff. That's what artists do. And so I was like, okay. So anyway, I carried this sketchbook around for like 4 years. And I think it had some phone numbers in it. I think that's all that was in her. So one time we're in her studio and she's struggling with a painting. And I was like, well, just look in your sketchbook and see, what kind of ideas you had. And she's like, I don't use a sketchbook. So yeah, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Anyway, so then we started collaborating on outside projects. So we were sort of collaborating in the studio up until the mid-90s. And then she started getting these gigs for printmaking workshops. So we would travel around the country and do monotype workshops and with school kids and stuff, which is amazing, by the way, because if you can get the parents to come in and join in, because the parents just say, oh, I don't know how to draw. And we were like, it's okay, it's just monotype. Just throw some things on the press and let it squish it, and something's going to happen on the other side. It's the Betty Crocker easy bake system. The little light bulb goes on and something comes out the other side. And it was like magic because the kids are excited because something happened. And then the adults were amazed that something actually looks pretty good, on the other side. And they didn't even have to draw. So it had some buy-in that way. In fact, one time I was going through TSA and the security guy was like, hey, you taught that printmaking workshop with one of my kids, And I was like, great, I don't have to take my shoes off. This is really great. So so we were doing that, and then the Mitchell project rolled around, and so then we worked really close together, and then we pretty much just traveled together up through the 2000s, and then in the last 5 years we've been working together 24/7. So I was over at the studio 7 days a week, and there was a lot going on. We had a lot of stuff going on, so it was great. I think the last 5 years were probably the most amazing because I learned more about painting than I had ever learned before. And I think that it's the proximity of working together. And in fact, as she was getting sicker at the end, I was helping her finish the paintings. And so I'd be like, trying to like, she's like, get it wet. No, it has to be wetter. Get it wetter. And then let it drip. It's not dripping. You have to make it drip. And then, so I would just keep trying, and eventually we would get it. And it would be that kind of process, how we would get everything done that way. But it was really amazing. I recommend any artist, especially for students, to work with another artist, regardless who that artist is, because it's so healthy. I mean, just looking at those Vermeer paintings and the Renaissance paintings and stuff, like half those cats didn't paint those themselves. They were teaching, It's part of the process of life. It's stand up, turn around, and bring forward, It's really important. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation and for sharing your observations and that beautiful poetry. I also loved your comments about the pickup truck being a reference to your grandfather, and I love the story you just told about your grandmother and the chocolate pudding. But it makes me curious about who Jean's role models were, and how she originally came to art making, as how she discovered that was her calling. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that.
So she would draw in the sand, and then her dad, who, by the way, his name is Art. Who knew? He would make little drawings on a piece of paper for her once in a while, and so she would carry those around. And then the mobile library would show up once in a while, and so she was an avid, voracious reader. And the only way to stay out of working in the barn all day is to climb in a tree with a book and hide. And so I think that was feeding it. And then she discovered in the back of a matchbook the artists, great artists, send in your drawing and you can win a scholarship or whatever. And she didn't win, but she tried that anyway. So there was that. And then she ended up seeing a movie about Toulouse-Lautrec. And that's what really sunk in. So we have this this photo of her taken with the neighbor's Brownie camera. I think she was 13 or 11, something like that. And she's on her knees with her shoes on her knees in a suit, and she's got axle grease on her face to make a goatee. And because she figured, oh, well, I have to be a man and I have to be short if I'm going to be an artist, right? But she did have a lot of those rules about the art world, like, oh, I have to smoke, I have to get a New York gallery, I have to get into the Whitney retrospective, all these things. But being a woman and also being a minority person of color, things were really difficult. So she would learn how to go around the doors to get things done, and because the doors would be shut. And so instead of just banging on the door, just look for another door. And so she was always sort of not breaking the rules or bending them, but like just making new ones and moving around. So I think, yeah, that's okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Oh, all right.
Okay, now it's hot. Okay. It's one of the things that is really interesting to me about her work are the sort of citations and references she's making to other artists, sort of across different canons. You mentioned Cy Twombly, maybe Joseph Albers, maybe Paul Rand. Who knows? And I was also really struck with what you were saying about the role that she played in making visible the work of, at the time, emerging Native American artists who are now obviously quite well known. So I'm wondering, at the time that she was coming up in the 70s even, did she have any Native American artists who were sort of influencing or impacting her work? And if so, do you know who those were? Or was she really so much at the beginning that,
Right. So Fritz Scholder was like the first. Because he was big time back then, and then there was. So we went to Fritz's openings and things like that, and then the other guy that passed away, the printmaker, drawing. He's Navajo. His name escapes me. All he did was a female figure with in blankets. Those drawings. 3-letter word is his first name. Art. Yeah, Art. Right. So it'll come to me in a minute. So that one, and then also Alan Hauser, and of course, there's a group of those like early modernist Native American artists that were college educated, and that largely due to the BIA, because the BIA would, if you were going to get a job off the reservation and survive, working for the BIA was one of those ways to do it. And then of course the BIA is going to take you somewhere, and so your kids are going to get a city education, and so they get a college education. So like Fritz studied, in LA and really honed his painting skills. George Morrison's another one, and like I think he studied abroad in Italy, in fact, and then came back. And so his like idea of design and abstraction was really vital. So yeah, she was looking at like those artists, and then also, Rauschenberg and Philip Guston and Jasper Johns, and you can see it in her work. I mean, she map paintings, and that idea of the map painting for her was that, well, Jasper Johns made a beautiful painting, and it's a map of the United States, but that's where it ends. And so she did it, but she put in all the names of the states that are actually Indian names. Because you can't spend a day in this country and not be impacted by Native American culture. Chocolate, tomatoes, potatoes, squash, beans, and the names of things. All the major U.S. highways are on trading maps. And so she made those maps in that way. So it's a cheeky way to get a point across, and so and it gives it another level of sophistication, which is really fabulous. She's one of my favorite artists. I mean, she's good, and we're looking at her work all the time now because we're working on the archive, and we're like digging through stuff and trying to get stuff uploaded into a database and all that, and I just keep seeing things, and I'm like, oh, that's where I got that idea. That's where I stole that idea. And I mean, everything comes from something, but it's amazing. It's such a wonderful feeling as a young artist thinking that you discovered something, but it's absolutely not true. You stole it from somewhere. It came from somewhere. But yeah. Any other? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your own work? And in asking this question, I will
Okay.
go back to our first slide.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your own work and obviously the debt that you owe to your mother, but some of the things that have animated your artistic practice in recent years.
So Maurice Sendak, I think everybody knows who that is. Wonderful story. So I have Max talking to Coyote, and this kind of dialogue, like the idea that like Max is trying to come up with a relationship, trying to identify, and Coyote's like, you can't put lipstick on a pig, And it's sort of that story of Yankee Doodle. You guys know the history of that song? The British wrote that song to make fun of the Americans, because Americans think, oh, they can just put a feather in their hat and it makes them sexy. And that's not how it works. These elite guys in England back in the, what was it, the 1700s, yeah. It was in the mid-1700s. It was only for a decade. It was like 10 years. The macaronis. And they would go abroad, study other languages, and then come back, and they'd be these aristocratic guys, well-educated, and then they would wear women's clothing. And then they'd hang out in bars. Maybe they were gay, some, yeah, but they wore tights, makeup, these huge wigs, and they called themselves macaroni. And that's a lot of effort, to get fitted and dressed up. And so it's more than just sticking a feather in your hat. So it's sort of this idea. And playing Indian, as we know, is a really popular thing. In fact, I was at a outdoor thrift market in New York City last year, and I found this little ring of an Indian head, and I bought it because I was like, I could have my own little mascot right here. And then I loved it so much, I ended up getting 9 more. So now I have 10 little Indians that I can wear. If that gives you some idea to my my process. So anyway, the thing I discovered about Jaune and I, and then a lot of other Native artists, is that we're maximalists. Like, we just can't stop sticking stuff in there. And so this compression and mayhem and chaos in this central location is just because I stopped drawing. But ordinarily, I would have kept going and filled in this whole area until it was chock-a-block, because that's just, why waste it, Are you going to eat that last sandwich? I was teaching at IAIA, and I had a Korean student that was sick for part of the semester, and so I just helped her make up the work in the printmaking class. And her mom sent me a stamp with my name in Korean. So this is a little stamp that says Neal in Korean, supposedly. I haven't vetted that yet, so I don't know. Who knows? It could say, kick me. I don't know. But I stick it on my work because I'm like, hey, that's cool. That's really cool. This splatter in here is spray paint in a pump action. It was acrylic spray paint in a pump action container that I found at Dick Blick one time, and it absolutely does not work. But it does something that it's probably not intended to do, which I used in the work. So that's some of that in there. A lot of graphite scribbling. This is coffee. I don't think it's going to fade, but it's definitely not waterproof. And then I have some form line design in there. There's the U, the open U, and then here's a trigon right here, another trigon there, and with an ovoid around it. So that's that coastal Salish iconography, and then I put some fish in there. I think I just read this article in National Geographic about toxic fish or something, and so I did this whole series putting fish everywhere in this toxic mayhem. And then, in fact, this one I painted with phosphorescent paint. So this fish here glows in the dark. So when you turn out the lights at night, the fish is glowing, which I thought, oh, what is more toxic than a glowing fish? Yeah. And then neither of them have had a shave in a while. And I think that's just many years of like Mad Magazine and, you know, that comic book style of humor, which I really like. Yeah. And dripping, lots of drips. Any questions about like that? I mean, this is just one thing that I do. I've done a bunch of glass work recently, neon. In 2009, I was flipping through an AE catalog. AE is abstract expressionism. And I saw Piero Calzolori had this neon triangle that said abstract in your home. And I was like, oh my gosh, that Italian guy is like doing spaghetti Western. It's a teepee. But it wasn't a teepee at all. It was just a triangle that said abstract in your home. But my identity told me it was a teepee. And so I immediately said, hey, this is like Jaune with her Jasper John map. I'm going to steal this and make it. So I did. So I made this giant triangle that says abstract in your home. And then I put the teepee poles at the top and the ear flap. Right? That's all I did to change it. But it makes such a stunning piece. And who doesn't love neon? So that's on display right now at the Zimmerli Gallery in Rutgers, that neon piece, which is it's really groovy. But since then, I've made a bunch of other neons. I have one that says American Gothic, which I thought was pretty good. And that one is, it's in a different color. The one at Rutgers is red. It's ruby red, actually. Anybody knows anything about neon? Ruby red is one of the early colors, really sexy red. And then American Gothic, I use Veep green, which is a very sexy green. Because when it's not on, it's yellow. The glass is yellow because it's coated. And then when it's activated, it turns this really wonderful green, like you want to eat it kind of thing. We're such suckers for light, don't you think? Don't go into light. I can't help it. Yeah. Anybody else?
We will be having a reception right now over at the museum. So please join us there where we can continue this conversation. But Neal, thank you so much for being here, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation. So thanks.
Thank you.